I'm author and critic David Agranoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of Postcards from a Dying World with a returning guest. David James Keaton is the author of a book I have not read called The Last Projector. Suck it, Trevino. I still haven't read it. But I have read his two most recent novels, Head Cleaner, which was one of my favorite reads of whatever year it came out. Was it 2021?
It was weird. It was supposed to be 24 or 22, and then it came out in 23. It was pushed back twice.
Oh, so maybe it was just last year then.
Could have been.
So back-to-back years, I've read kick-ass novels from this man, David James Keaton, who's joining us. Head Cleaner was one of my favorite novels of that year, which was apparently last year, which, by the way, is no little feat because I read a lot of good stuff last year.
See, I really liked you reviewed that, and you said a line that stuck with me. You said that it doesn't make any sense, and that's fine. And you're absolutely right. You're the only person who's called me out on that book not making any sense.
Well, I'm a Philip K. Dick guy. You know, he doesn't make sense half the time, right? He wrote Counterclock World. That book makes less than 0 sense. So, you know, I'm totally fine with that. But it is what it is. I'm sorry my internet's buffering weirdly a little bit. But do I have you there, David? All right, so we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but yeah, and if you're watching the visual, you get cool stuff.
Well, you were talking about basketball, so
yeah, we did talk about basketball for a while before we started. I was teaching David James Keaton some basketball metaphors that he can use the rest of his life. But
wait, I already forgot the word. What was the word? It was I want to say ISO. Yeah. What?
ISO ball.
No, ISO ball.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, have you ever heard of ISO Bar?
No.
It's one of those notoriously unproduced screenplays. Sylvester Stallone was going to make the movie out of it. You said you're going to see Alien soon. It's kind of like an Alien knockoff on a train or something. But the name comes up a lot as this one of the best unproduced screenplays. Anyway, it's called ISO Bar. So
well, you know, Voyage of the Demeter, which finally came out last year, was one of those for 20 years people talked about, you know, and then it was okay, but, you know, not the best movie. But for 20 years, people were like, oh, there's this great script that's floating around, and all these people were attached to it. It's so funny. But you and I could go on movie tangents. That's actually
we're not doing that?
Book. Yeah, your last book was a movie tangent, pretty much, set to time travel. But yeah, we were talking about plot, like things making sense and not making sense. I was actually just reading a whole thing where, Philip K. Dick's favorite author growing up was A.E. Von Vogt, and Von Vogt used to get criticized as far back as the 40s for having plots that didn't make sense. But it was exactly why Phil found him to be such a influence as a kid, because he was like, "Oh, this is awesome. His books don't make sense. Like the universe can fall apart and it's fine, you know."
Is he the guy? Did he write? I think I read one of his stories in those science fiction Hall of Fame books that you.
Yeah, he wrote The Weapon Shop.
Yeah, The Weapon Shop, and that's one of those. You were talking about fix up books or fix it books.
Yeah.
That might be one of those where
it is one of those. Yeah. He wrote a couple fix up books, but where he took all of his, and Null A was one of them too, because it was serialized in
Yeah, I didn't read that one. I love the weapon shops. It was like a science fiction needful things kind of deal.
yeah, you'd like World of Null A too. It's even more bonkers. But yeah, so speaking of bonkers books, let's get on topic here. Shallow Ends is the new book that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But if you guys want to go back and hear about Head Cleaner, which is a time traveling VCR novel that is full of movie tangents, my episode is up here. I don't remember which number it was, but you can find it, and I highly recommend that book. Shallow Ends is.
Can I just? Sorry, I just wanted to jump in real quick and say
Sure.
That Head Cleaner, the one that you recommended in the last episode, is out of print. So
it's out of print already.
Yeah, it's coming out under a new publisher.
All right. Well,
so I think I probably steered people towards a dead end in that last episode, saying where to get it. It's going to be re-released in January of 2026 through Datora Books.
Ooh, so I have a limited rare edition, huh?
Yes, yours has maybe one less or one more Pantera joke in it. I'm not sure the differences. So it's going to be out of print for a minute, but it's coming back, and it's going to be kind of a reintroduced to the world, I guess, which is a good thing, because it was a kind of a pandemic casualty.
Got it. Well, yeah, it's certainly a good book. So when it comes around, let me know what I can do to help. Shallow Ends here is the reason why we mentioned fix-up novels. We're going to talk about it in a little bit, because you kind of went old school by doing a fix-up novel in a way.
Did I?
Yeah, and but so what a fix-up novel was, so if people don't know, and my listeners should know, because like I cover 30s and 40s and 50s science fiction all the time, is back in the day, a lot of these authors, like, in order to get paid, sometimes they would break up novels and publish chapters as short stories. A good example of that is the one we just covered. Well, actually, I've recorded it, but this will come out first. But we'll be covering soon Clifford Simak's The Huddling Place from the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, which is actually chapter 2 of City by Clifford Simak. And A.E. Von Vogt, Weapon Shop, which is in that volume as well, was expanded. So it's different, because sometimes they would expand these books, sometimes they would take older short stories and put them into a novel, but they take short stories and kind of balloon animal them into.
That's a good visual.
Well, you were the one that used it.
That's why it's good. That's why I recognize the awesomeness. The Martian Chronicles is probably the best example, isn't it? The Bradbury's Martian Chronicles.
Yeah, Martian Chronicles is probably the most famous. Yeah. Fix-up novel. Or
but you're right, that
Foundation.
Science Fiction Hall of Fame is just crammed full of stuff that but it's like a chicken. Is it a chicken or the egg, or the egg and the chicken? Like which one, as you described? Did they disassemble something to try to get something out there, or did they reassemble something and then come up with this Frankenstein monster? Looking at the ones in Science Fiction Hall of Fame, I think it's more the latter, because Scanners Live in Vain is one. Flowers for Algernon was an expansion, but like was it Seedling Stars? The one that it was Surface Tension was the short story where microscopic humans are trying to break through the tension on the top of the water.
Microcosmic God, no.
That
was Sturgeon. No, it's easy to confuse when you get to them.
But you're right. They take. It's like, which direction do they go in? Do they blow something up and put it all out there? Do they reassemble it into like an awkward reconstituted whole? And I don't know. I think that I'm going to defend my choices, and maybe it is or is not a fix-up novel. But I like that we're on this path, because I can just later on I'll tell you like how it kind of was constructed, and that is
and I want to get into that.
Yeah.
It may not be technically a fix-up novel, but it looks like it when you look at the acknowledgments and you have listings for 6 or 7 pieces of the novel that appeared as short stories in various other forms. And that is, either way you look at it, you look at it as clever appropriation of time and effort. But and I said this in my review, and I was kind of just being sarcastic about it, but Jeremy Robert Johnson is a great example. He did a short story collection called Angel Dust Apocalypse, right? But at nowhere on any of the Amazon pages or anything did it say short story collection. He just put it out there, and it sold better than your average short story collection because it wasn't marketed as a short story collection. And it had a title that it didn't say "and other stories." It just said Angel Dust Apocalypse. And the conventional wisdom in publishing is that short story collections don't sell. And whether it's true or not, the idea is that most readers want novels, baby. They want novels. But so my thought was, how did you come to this novel? Did you want to make use of those stories? Did you know story collections weren't selling, or did the novel just, how did this start?
I think it was both things at once, where I kind of have the habit of, as I'm writing a novel, each chapter, if a chapter becomes like a set piece where it feels like it could be a standalone story, I'll send it out there and try to, publish it as a short story. But that was back, if you look at that acknowledgments page, that happened a while back. I haven't sent a lot of short stories out, and short story markets are really tough now, where
I only write short stories when I'm invited now.
Right. That's kind of it's kind of foolish to spend that time and effort to do it, send it out, get your rejection 24 hours later, and then file it away. Unless somebody specifically says, I'd like you to do it.
And the market is so annoying. It's the reason why there's 700 horror themed pizza stories right now.
Yeah.
Because
sorry about that. But so it's tough. And with this particular book, it was it's been around a long time. It's been around since I lived in Louisville, which was maybe a decade ago. And I had an experience on a fire truck with a hot tub in the back. I guess real quick, I'll tell you the main plot of it for anybody that doesn't know. There's a fire truck that has a hot tub in the back where kids are drinking and partying, and it rolls around, and at some point they're worried that it will never stop. So that sort of happened. When I was in Louisville, we rented out this party bus, which was actually a fire truck with a hot tub in it. It didn't have any water in it though. But so we stood in a dry hot tub, and everybody kind of got drunk as it drove around Louisville. And we just started talking about, if it went just a little bit faster and it didn't pull over, we would be stuck in this thing. What would we do? How would we get out of it? And it became kind of a thought experiment. So that was the beginning of it. And that was a short story that I published with Word Horde's Tales of a Talking Board. It was their Ouija board book. Because in the story, the debate becomes, can you play? They want to play party games, but they're in a pool. Can you play with a Ouija board in a pool? How would you do it? Could you create a Ouija board with a bunch of people? If you designate them yes or no, etc., make the spinning bottle will become the planchette. So that debate made for a nice little short story, and that's where it started. And then I got a request to expand that, to try to make it into something bigger. So I did that, and I was happy with how it came out. It was more of a novella at this point. And this was back when Fangoria was publishing novels for a minute. And I had somebody recommended that I submit it there, and the editor at the time took a look at it and seemed to really like it, but didn't like how it started. So he asked, he's like, I was really disappointed when the book starts that they're already on the fire truck and all this stuff is happening in the pool. And so it's kind of the difference between a novel and a short story. That's how you want to start your short story, maybe, is, get things moving. Whereas he wanted, can we back it up? So as I started to imagine what backing it up meant, it meant expanding on all the stories of all the people that were in the truck before they're in the truck. And so I came up with this kind of big intro. Well, then Fangoria stopped publishing novels. After I spent probably 6 months overhauling this thing and kind of turning it into, at this point now it's creeping up to novel length. And so then I was really sad about that. So I put it away. And then I started thinking about it later, and I thought, as I started messing with it more and more, and it became at that point I thought that nobody's going to publish this book. So if I just maybe I'll just keep writing short stories about every one of these characters, and they'll be standalone pieces. And short stories at that point were a little hotter where I was getting those published. So it became a series of all of the backgrounds of each character became their own short stories, which got out there first. So then
kind of like the flashbacks on Lost. They're all on the island, but we get all the backstories for wherever they were there.
And as I got further and further away from the beginning of the book, of conceiving of it as just one night in this book, or one night in this fire truck, the backstories got weirder and weirder. And as you might have, when you read it, you might have noticed that they get more insane as they go. Right. And so then I kind of had to justify that. It starts to feel like I didn't want it to be like Haunted, which I liked, but if you've ever read Chuck Palahniuk's Haunted, it's kind of it's like a Liars Club kind of deal that people come together to tell stories. It's kind of that, but I wanted all of the stories to be really, they have to be essential to what the overall book is doing. So
right, and they stand alone on their own, but they work together very well. And I like the idea that they get weirder because, like, for example, like, the dollar bill wall, right, is it's a pretty simple story about this place, but it does a really good job of setting up the setting of like this bar where people hang up the first dollar bills they made with their degrees, and then you have later you have the heist and then in the shark, for example, the shark story where it gets really fucking bizarre. So I like how it kind of ratchets up, but at the same time the on the parallel of it is the story of the kind of the fire truck and the lost highway and the and all that is going on, so there's really two parallel tracks going on in this novel, and that's one of the things that's kind of fun about it. But what I think people need to know about like kind of the energy and the vibe of this novel is that you've kind of built this between this and Head Cleaner, you've got this real kind of fast dialogue, kind of self-aware, like Clerks type thing, but you've also got like the individual stories and the weird thing going on, so it gives it a little bit of Twilight Zone. And then the framing story has like the party bus speed thing kind of going on, so it's three really nice different styles that are blended together into one story. So those are the things that make this novel like really unique and really work. And it's what I think is most important about this novel is that it's very fun. It's a fun read. I'm laughing quite a bit while reading it. I may have laughed a wee bit more during Head Cleaner because there were certain jokes that just worked for me. Pantera jokes always work for me. I had a circle of friends who made jokes about Pantera constantly, so you hit a note with me, right? We have lots of Dimebag and Vinnie Paul jokes in a circle of friends that I had, so that's one thing. But yeah, so the tone was interesting. Can you talk to me about, kind of finding that tone in Shallow Ends? Because it is somewhat of a collection mixed with the novels, each of the stories have somewhat of a different tone. So the framing story has to have its own tone in its own right, right?
Yeah. That was kind of pushed by the new publisher Podium. Is They got their start doing audiobooks, and audio is their big thing. So their big book was The Martian.
Yeah.
And they're right now, I think they're trying to make this transition into hardcovers, paperbacks, but audio is always their concern, is how can this be entertaining?
Yeah.
So when I pitched it to them, they their acquisitions editor was really into the and she really liked that part a lot, and so I actually did an overhaul on it. I thought it was kind of good to go because I spent so much time on it for Fangoria and it didn't happen. That initially they said, well, we're not going to have to do a whole lot of work on this one, just maybe a line edit. But then a couple weeks later, they called and said, we're going to do a developmental edit, and it's going to be an extensive edit. And I thought, oh no, they read it. They got past the framing story and probably said, what the fuck? There's half shark people. What is going on in here? So the developmental edit was to keep that momentum going of the framing story, and the framing story then has to dominate. And it didn't mean I didn't really have to cut anything down, but there was the dollar bill heist was kind of long. And so, but I found a great solution, which was tell it from the point of view of three different people, so that it establishes those three different people on the same night outside of the one night on the hot tub, and that becomes kind of the nucleus of it, because there's sort of a woman centric battle going on the back of in the hot tub. So those three get to kind of shine there. And I think that helped it balance it out, where instead of it felt like bookends originally, where they get on this bus, crazy shit happens, they tell stories, we resolve it. Instead, I made a point of coming back to the fire truck every other chapter, no matter what. So that whole structure necessitates something has to happen every time I come back to the truck. And that's what the developmental edit became. The guy I worked with, Wes Miller, he said, every time it comes back to the truck, we have to learn new information or have a new dilemma or resolve something. So that's what I did do it. And I think that's what makes it okay that it keeps going into all the heads of everybody so deeply, is that it always says, well, we're back to this situation that has to be resolved. So that's kind of how that happened. And that's kind of like the structure of your book, The Last Night to Kill Nazis. It looked like, I mean, I don't know the creation of that one, but it looked like there was some efforts to keep it to structure. The structure of it kind of dictated how it went. You have you have the death of Hitler in the bunker, and then you have like everything that happens on the next day, and then the next night. But mostly it's that entire May 1st or whatever, 1945.
Well, there was two structures there.
Okay, because it seemed like there was. I'm guessing there was some changes made to that structure. I'm just curious to what you did.
No. Once I had it locked in from the beginning, because the two things that where I knew I had to structure it was you had to have the race between the Nazis trying to get to the mountain and the vampire and the Allies trying to beat the Nazis to try and keep them from escaping, right? So you have the two, so it was a rhythm of going back and forth between the two. But what was key for that book was figuring out, like, how do you have a Nazi POV? And that's when I came up with the secretary who was pregnant with the SS officer, because then I was like, and that all came about because when I was doing research, I saw an interview with a woman who had been one of Hitler's secretaries, and even in her 80s, like in the 70s, she was like, "Oh, Hitler was so misunderstood. He was such a nice guy." And then I was like,
What?
"The fuck? Yeah, she's got to be a character." Well, I
But it's
appreciate that you checked out the book,
well,
but
it seems like it seems similar where you're kind of doing that dance of whereas Shallow Ends has the POV switch every other
Mhm.
chapter. It felt like you kind of had to do a similar dance to keep the balls in the air.
yeah, and I like that. If and the thing is, Star Wars made it most famous with having 3 point of views going to the final battle, right? So every Star Wars always has 3 POVs heading towards the final
Oh,
battle,
okay. Yeah.
right? And so with last night, um, the story was structured on the 2 POVs and trying to have a rhythm between the two. So you'd want to kind of have like the pace of each one, which is in Shallow Ends. What you've got is that you had to kind of keep a pace similarly between the backstories and making sure that the backstories pace match what you're doing, the trip that you're going on the fire truck. Am I right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of the rhythm that you
Yeah.
had to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because my biggest fear was that people would get to the either the fire truck story or people would get to the back one of the backstories and they wish and I was worried that they would start wishing they weren't there. That they would be
Yeah,
like,
that
oh,
you're wishing that they were the other one.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, oh no, why this? It was
Yeah.
like
And if you look at my outline for last night, and I'm only talking about this because you brought it up.
no, I want to talk about it a little bit more before you're done.
Yeah. But the only reason, I have a firm belief in that there has to be a rhythm to the structure when you're doing various POVs or characters. And you have to make sure, like, okay, I haven't been with this character for a while. And then and just like anything, you got to make sure there's kind of a cliffhanger. So I leave you on a cliffhanger on the Nazi secretary
Wait,
story.
don't spoil if there's a I haven't finished it. So don't if there's an ending, don't spoil anything.
Oh, I won't. I
Okay.
won't. But
I'm not done yet, but I assumed that structure was gonna keep going.
yeah, yeah, it
Back to
does, and it changes a little bit once the vampire's awake. But uh, you know, the funny thing is the example of my own writing where I feel like I did the best with that is I wrote a climate change apocalypse novel called Ring of Fire that came out from Deadeye in 2018.
Hmm.
And I tried to write something as epic as, End of the World, as something like The Stand, but I wanted to keep it to 300 pages. And it has multiple characters and multiple points of views. And I thought there's got to be a way to do that in less than 700 pages, right? And working with the rhythm and the structure of making sure, like, when I outlined the novel, I looked at it as like a song structure. Like, I do this character, this character, this character, this character, this character, this character.
Mm.
And I just tried to make sure that I was building off of that. Now, if the story required me to go somewhere else, I would, but I tried to keep it in that rhythm. And one of the things I like about Shallow Ends is that you were very conscious of, and I will admit there are a couple times where I'm like, okay, I get it with this part of the story. Let's get back to the fire truck. And almost every time I felt that, the story did go back within a page or two of me like having that thought. And that is a
That's good.
compliment to you, sir, on the use of structure, because I'm a structure guy. I'm a structure geek, if you couldn't tell from
I,
last night.
no, I love it when I feel like I'm in good hands
Exactly.
when there's some sort of effort to structure it. I don't know if that's my OCD talking, but
Yeah.
and I don't like it when it breaks that for no reason, or it just feels like a good rhythm. It's like it gets kind of a song going.
Yep.
That
Oh,
became
you're a man after my own heart, because that is absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of those Stephen King doorstops are fucking impossible for me. I could never read Under the Dome. I would, I can't.
well,
It,
you don't need to read Under the Dome.
uh, yeah.
It's not bad, but it's not essential.
Well,
Um,
and look, I don't want to sound like I'm totally bashing Uncle Steve. I'm reading You Like It Darker right now, and it's a short story collection, and I love it.
I was
But
just surprised by his Under the Dome is not. I didn't feel like I wasted my time reading it. I just didn't. I was amazed that he rated it so highly with his own work. You saw that list of the
yeah,
greatest novels of the century or whatever, and Stephen King listed his own book, and it would have been nobody would have batted an eye if he did any other book, but Under the Dome just feels kind of mid, as the kids say. It's
yeah.
just
I've never read it because I just looked at the
it's a
link.
great idea. It
Yeah.
really is a great idea, and it
Well,
has
I
one.
also knew the backstory that he had been trying to write it since the 80s in various forms,
Oh,
and that it was just like one of those wet rubber snakes that kept slipping out of his hands. And I felt like instead of him saying like what's going wrong, can I start over and do a shorter version, he just kept adding to it and adding to it, you know.
yeah, I can feel that. it
Yeah,
it reminds me
and
a lot of Needful Things, which I think was the first Stephen King I book or I read where I was disappointed. Up until that point, every time I'd read one of his books, I would think this is amazing and it's always going to be amazing. And then I read Needful Things and I thought, oh, he's mortal. This
yeah.
one's not. I don't know. This one's okay. And Under the
I
Dome
know it's
feels
a
like,
funny position for a straight edger to take, but I love his cocaine years for
yeah. I mean, it doesn't.
parts writing for
There's
it.
none of that structure you like.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the thing with Uncle Steve, and the reason I mean, God bless the man, and I love him personally. I just love his existence, and I hope he writes forever. But I think one of the reasons why he's such a best-selling author. Nobody sells as many books as he does, so he's become a common language, and I feel it's easier to talk about, like, because I there's no shortage of people that I can talk about why The Outsider only works for 150 pages and then falls apart because everybody's read it, and like, or most of his work, so you can have those discussions. But at the same time, like, you know I think later his hard case crime novel from a couple years ago is genius, right?
Yeah, I
So
heard that was. I heard it's real good.
yeah. Well, I like that it doesn't cheat. I'm a person that can't stand first person because everybody cheats in it. And there's a couple examples of first person narration novels that don't cheat, and the list is very short. And two of them are Stephen King, which
So
is
how do you
Claiborne and later.
define cheating?
Well, um, so in a first person narrative, it's like a found footage movie, right? And so in found footage movies, they cheat when they come up with bullshit reasons for why the camera is still on. Like no
Sure.
one would leave the camera on and set it down sideways on the couch at the
Right.
exact right time, right?
Right.
So first person narratives and epistolary novels do that all the time, where people in the novels write like someone who wouldn't write that way if they were
Right.
just telling their story.
Right. I always describe it as the Monty Python when they're reading the wall where somebody carved, "Ah," and he says,
Yeah,
how could he have carved that while he was dying? Yeah, it's.
right.
I see what you're saying.
And
Uh,
so Dolores Claiborne doesn't cheat because the whole thing is like her interview with the police. And
yeah.
it doesn't cheat. It's exactly what that conversation would be. And another one, recent example is Josh Malerman's Incidents Around the House that just came out this summer.
Mhm.
And it's a first person narrative by a child. And I thought there's no way he's going to fucking keep this up for the whole book. And God bless Josh, he did. And it's
Wow.
incredible. And there's a few times where he skirts the edge with cheating, but
Where it
uh,
gets what a little bit like Calvin and Hobbes, where it gets a little too smart.
no, I mean, he has the character describing things that the dado and mom say, and she definitely doesn't understand them, and we have to understand them, right? Like we know what they're trying to say, and there are times where he could have had them explain it more, but he didn't. And so I don't think he cheated, and I
That's
think the
kind of
book,
like that was like
yeah,
the dilemma of Flowers for Algernon. Um,
right.
well, another fix up.
Another fix up. Yeah.
Where how if you're gonna turn that short story into a novel, you gotta protect, you gotta have that voice peak and then fall off, and something odd happens because when he spends more time as a genius, it's not as sad or something. This is just my response to it. Is as a short story, it's very, very sad. But if you stretch it out to a novel, it's like, well, you had a good run, Charlie. you know.
Right.
So
God
that's a
damn,
case
we
of,
are really bad tangenters, Keaton, because we keep losing
well,
the.
this I'll bring it back to the book in this way. The one of the biggest points of contention with the editor was the point of view. The with the structure of it's third person whenever it's on the truck, and then it's first person whenever whenever somebody's telling their story. Tells his story, and but Lund tells his story on the truck in real time. So the editor Wes, he said this should be a chapter outside of the truck. This should be Lund's story. He's telling the story of his mother with the one eye and the license plates, and but it couldn't do that because the structure would fall apart if his story was outside of the truck, because I didn't have the right number of fire truck chapters to go every other. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I would have had to double up the character stories but it had to be in first person because you had to tell it in first person. So long story short, that's the only time someone tells their backstory and you see it happen. The other time you kind of have to suspend disbelief. Like, are they talking right now? Are they telling their story? Some of them, they're talk about cheating. Sometimes I'll just say, I didn't hear a word that guy said because the story couldn't be heard. But with Lund, I actually have he tells his story to them in real time. And the way to justify it is I have them all reject it. And they say, no, you don't get to tell your story. And he's bullied into that position where the book doesn't allow him to have his moment. And that's the only way I could sidestep not breaking the structure of the POV. Because like you said, the first person is it's that's a high wire act, and I couldn't really pull it off on the truck. So it had to be third person on the truck, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's funny because I can't stand first person, so I usually like if the right author will make it work, right? But for me personally, I don't write in first person because I have very few short stories that are written in first person. Because to me, it's like, well, why am I going to tell a story of a novel if I can't use all the tools in the toolbox, right? And
Sure, but it's so
and
much easier. I mean, you can just fly right through it when you start using that eye.
yeah,
All of a sudden you don't have to research anything. All of a sudden you can be wrong about everything because it frees you up. So it's pretty intoxicating. But
yeah.
talk about
Well, most
a
people
hard
who write
sell.
in first person, well,
Nobody wants
that's
to
the
buy those
problem is
novels.
most people that write in first person cheat. And
They do.
they'll have
They
the
cheat,
worst
and
cheatingest novel that I've read from a major publisher in the last couple of years was there's a sci-fi horror novel that was pretty big a couple of years ago that everybody was excited about called Ascension by Nicholas Benji, I think his name was, the English author.
okay.
That book is supposed to be epistolary and it cheats so fucking much that I mean I savaged the book in my review first off, and but like I couldn't believe that an editor looked at this and didn't be like, because it would like chapters would start off epistolary as or it's supposed to be a letter, and then there'd be long descriptions, and then things would happen and POVs would switch, and I was just like, who the fuck is editing this shit, right? And it's one of the few times as a like critic or whatever on the side that I do where I was just like, no, fuck this, I'm gonna shit on this book because um I just couldn't believe how much the shit cheated. And and it was a major publisher. I liked the story, kind of.
Yeah.
I thought the execution was terrible, but you know what what's funny about, and I'm going to bring this back to Shallow Ends, which is really funny because if you had told me an abstract, the party bus story or whatever, the plot didn't sound super amazing to me, but I wanted to read it because I loved your execution in Head Cleaner, right? And like, but if you just said like the whole thing's set on a party bus, it doesn't stop, I probably would have been like, whatever. But I will follow authors I like to anything, right?
That was the only reason. Party bus people, the people like to hate on party buses and pedal pubs right now. And that was honestly, that was finally after a decade why somebody took it, was because of that hook.
I'm sure I'm alone on that.
But
no,
I'm with you. Like that's why all those characters are punished. I don't want to be on that truck either. I'm on your side.
But my point is that I like it out of respect for the execution, right? I love the execution. And God bless your editor for not, and your publishers for not making a Rashomon comparison with the 3 point of views for the heist.
That's true.
I'm so sick of it's like Rashomon, you know.
Right.
Yeah, we've done that now. It's beyond Rashomon now. It's just a tactic we use. It's not just Rashomon.
Yeah, and that's it isn't quite that. I could see. I don't want to defend that as a metaphor, but yeah, the idea of, you know, the reset and seeing things from a different point of view is fun. So
well, they made that comparison on Star Wars: The Acolyte, and the various point of views were multiple episodes apart from each other, and so I felt like to do Rashomon, you kind of have to do it so you're like, you know, you're going right back and forth between the different point of views. And I think doing it 3 episodes later, it's like, no, you don't get to make the Rashomon comparison at this point, you know?
Yeah.
The point of view,
the point of view and the number of the number of characters was always, and I don't want to say it was a concern, but early on when they were saying that their first step was to make it into an audiobook, and they do like a full production. So it's going to have, they're going to act it out. So they wanted to know, well, who do you want? Here's a list of people, listen to their voices. Tell me who you want for the characters. And I thought, I got 13 fucking characters in this thing. Like, you're not really going to hire 13 people. And, but I don't think that that's not normally a concern for most books. It certainly isn't a concern for a first person book, as you pointed out. Like, you can cheat. Also, you can cheat as far as how much you want to spend on a narrator, even if you act it out.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's funny because I think that kind of Lost Highway vibe thing that kind of goes on a little bit later in the story, once the party bus is kind of out on the road and you kind of get the idea that they're on this kind of desolate highways, somewhat of the vibe changes in the mood of like the desperation on the truck. And so some of the things that kind of where that desperation kind of builds is one of the things that I really appreciated about how the novel was structured, you know. And I know I was kind of joking around a lot in my review, and I probably didn't get into it as much as I got into Head Cleaner as far as like breaking down all the details and bits. But I feel like the kind of fun nature of the characters is much more important to this one. And I think like there are a lot of characters, but there's also like a lot of exploration of, you know, their guilt and what's going on. And it's a lot of fun for people who are like, if you're thinking like, holy shit, it's going to be this obnoxious party I don't like going to obnoxious parties, so I don't want to read about one. Well, you want to read about one where they're kind of
stuck there. Yeah. Who wants to be stuck at one? That's even worse.
Yeah, well, and I think writers should appreciate wanting to get into this book. And it's funny because I don't think I would. It's funny because I know I'm not doing a good job of selling the audio book, but I'm hoping people will read it and sit down
Oh,
and
me
read
too.
it because I think you're going to get more of the structure and what you're doing as a writer
Yeah.
out of reading the print version.
I would agree. I mean, it was never written with an intent to be acted out. I guess it's conducive to that because it's got so much banter and that kind of
And
that
that
kind of
will be
stuff is.
fun.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'm curious to hear what it's going to sound like. But yeah, I'm glad that you liked the part where they're trying to where they're dealing with the situation in a serious way, because that's where I really dug into it as far as thinking about how would you get off that truck? What would you have to do? And to take it completely seriously, if you
Yeah.
it's not just a speed thing like, we got to get off this bus, it won't slow down below 55 miles an hour. Instead, it's, you know, also, can you use that as an excuse to settle grudges? And the logistics of, there's kind of an Indiana Jones deal, crawling under the truck kind of shit, but also acknowledging that those things rarely work out.
Yeah.
If the characters are emulating what they've seen in films or what they think they know about being stuck in that situation, I hope that it's satisfying how those moments turn out, because
Yeah.
that's how I think it would really happen.
Well,
Even
as
as
a
ridiculous as sorry, I was going to say, is even as ridiculous as maybe their headspace gets to be, I tried to ground that in, that's what I imagine happening if people were stuck in that situation.
right. Well, and as a high concept structuralist, that's what I appreciated about this book is that you've got the concept, you've got the characters. So what you have to do is you have to structure the novel to include all the characters, give background to all the characters, and at the same time, you have to keep the story moving. So this is a puzzle that someone who like me, who's a structuralist, storytelling wise, I enjoyed watching you put the pieces of the puzzle together, right? And now I feel like I got to go back and rewrite my book review because I feel like I did not do you justice on that, because that is one of the things that I really liked about it. You know,
Well, I appreciated I was reading the review, and it actually sounded like somebody on that bus. It sounded like when
yeah,
somebody was stuck on that bus, like it kind of comes out swinging. So
yeah, I was in a little bit of a goofy mood when I wrote that, but
I mean,
I was also fucking with Trevino. So, but and but that is, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I like F. Paul Wilson and the Repairman Jack books is because he's a guy who loves structure and wants structure, and all those books. And his whole career is like one of of I think he's the structure in Yoda, first off. And I've taken classes on plotting from him and interviewed him
wow.
specifically on plotting on this podcast. I did. It wasn't intended to be an interview. It was just me picking his brain on plotting, and then I put it up here. It's like the third or fourth episode of the show.
Interesting.
Um, and
Is there a structure to the keep? That's the only one I read, and I don't remember it being
well, there's a
hinging on.
misdirection to the keep.
That's
Um,
true. That's true.
and the misdirection is a huge part of it. And Paul loves to use his structure to misdirect his readers. And 6 books into Repairman Jack, he's still doing it.
I can kind of see the influence on you as far as the keep's attempt to, I don't want to say make a sympathetic Nazi, but at least swim in that pool a little bit as far as Nazis.
There are 3 heavy homages to the keep in Last Night.
There'd have to, yeah, you've got sort of a twist on the vampire, on the Nazi situation. I didn't know.
Yeah, but
Mine
is actually a vampire, which
you folded under questioning. It's all coming clear now.
Yeah, no, well, and much like the Keep is and I'm spoiling a 40-year-old book, but the trick of the Keep is that it's all structured to make you think it's a vampire novel, but it's not.
Right. It's
It's
fucking
something much
space.
worse.
It's like aliens or something. I don't know. I don't even know
No,
what it is.
it's basically like the adversary, the anti-god
Interdimensional.
creature that's buried there. And this becomes the setup for two series. The Keep sets up two different series, one with 6 books and one with 15 books. And the Keep starts that whole saga, and it all ends with book 15 of one series and book 6 of another series are the same book. It's a structuring like insanity.
Well, it
And
sounds like is there such a thing as a fix up series
yeah,
where
yeah.
you
Well, that's kind of what, because Paul initially did not intend to write a whole series of Repairman Jack books,
right,
right? And then and even 6 books into Repairman Jack, he was fooling people. The 6th book of Repairman Jack is all set up to make you think it's well, no, it's a third book, Legacies, is all set up to make you think it's a haunted house novel, and it's a techno thriller. But the first like 6 chapters of it, you're like, oh, this is the Repairman Jack haunted house novel, but it's not, right?
right.
And he was doing that shit, you know, 12 books into that series. It's crazy. But anyways, I'm sorry, I'm digressing again.
I accidentally I stepped on a toy and it just started going off on me.
Well, I can't
Everything in
hear
this
it.
room makes noise, and I accidentally hit my toe, hit it, and it started jamming.
Well, I actually didn't think I heard it. I didn't know if that was an alarm of like you're talking about Paul Wilson too long, but I am. But no, and I think that one of the reasons why I bring him up is because like I think he's somebody who does structure like we do. Like there's a rhythm to it. He does everything based on the actual day. He wants everything to make sense within how an actual day works. So he's constantly thinking, and I had to do that with last night because it's set on a real day and
Yeah,
night. But yeah, and you had to do that with this one because we're all in one trip, right? We're all in one trip on the fire truck. So
right. But I cheat like hell, man, because it's what how long are they on the truck? The sun has to come up, and then the sun never came up. So,
right.
got to cheat that stuff. Are they drunk? Are they? That's what I loved about having it take place on a leap day is just a hint that something supernatural is going on.
Yeah.
Without
And
actually, I don't like actually having anything supernatural, but I like to hint that it could be. Um, to
well, and I
just kind
keep
of
bringing up Lost Highway because that's what I kept thinking of whenever they were going down the highway. Is I would picture that hypnotic shot that Lynch starts off, Lost Highway with. And I kept thinking about that. I don't know if I'm thinking the wrong thing, but
um,
I lost sound on my end here for a bit.
you just freeze.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I think I lost your sound too. So
okay.
I
Yeah, I
think we're
was
good now. So
cool. I was saying that there is a lot of Lynch in the book. There's Lynch is into doppelgangers, and there's a lot of doppelgangers in Shallow Ends. I think every character has a parallel or somebody that they're trying to emulate. Um, and even three of them, are arguably their own little unit. But there are a lot of Lost Highway Lynchian doppelgangers where they seem to be they're trying to turn into something else or laboring to shed whatever they were in the water, kind of thing. The
right.
original, go
And
ahead.
it just occurred to me that people might be like, dude, you guys are spoiling the shit out of this book. I don't think you can spoil this book. I think this book, I
Yeah, no,
think
everything we're talking about is probably in the first 20 pages. Yeah.
right. Well, also I think what's going on is you know, and listen, I'm gonna always tell the people that this is how I do reading books that I like take recommendations on. is what you should do right now is go and pre-order this book, or put it on hold at your library, request it at your library, and then like 5 or 6 months from now, you'll forget all this shit, and it'll be a new book for you.
There you go.
But we will have convinced, and then you come back and listen to it again, and then you're gonna be like, yeah. So then I get another play, and we can all talk about it.
I like it. I like the plan.
All right. So on that note, tell people how they can find this book.
You can find it. It's at Podium. So if you just Google Podium and Shallow Ends, it should pop right up. But you can, whatever retailer you use. This one has a pretty good distribution. It's probably best if you have a local bookstore that you really like, order it there. Maybe they'll stock it for a minute. There's going to be a push to get it into a lot of stores, but that doesn't last no matter what. You just got that little window. So I think that's probably the best way to do it, is to go to your local bookstore, ask for it to be ordered, depending on the format you want. I think the paperback and the Kindle and the audiobook all come out at the same time.
And keep in mind, too, that asking for it at the big national chains, like in those stores, like a lot of the people you're talking to at those big chains, they don't have any control over what they order. But if they hear enough times somebody talking about a book, they're more inclined to do something about it, and so I appreciate the hell out of, for example, every time, somebody tells me that they went up and asked at Barnes and Nobles, even though I know it's going to be there. Last night's going to be there.
Right.
It helps for the book sellers to hear somebody say, like, hey, do you have this?
Right.
Even if you already have it, ask them to show you where it is. Like when you're there, that helps immeasurably, because then it puts it on the radar of those booksellers, and they might be thinking next time,
Yeah. I would say only do it on Audible or Amazon if you have those free credits. They always give you that free trial. Use your free trial for the audiobook, because the audiobooks can get kind of pricey. So
yes.
And does Amazon, do they need your money to build another rocket? Probably not.
No.
So yeah, local bookstores are where it's at, or wherever. It should be where books are sold.
Ever books are sold, yeah. I finally got to say that. I'm really excited about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, last night's my first nationally distributed book.
Nice. So. See, it's because of the hook, because you kill some Nazis in it.
Well, that helps. The sales pitch of if you hate Nazis but like vampires is well, Christoph told me
you got to watch out about getting that flipped. You got to.
Yeah, I know. I got to
say that in reverse.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm pretty careful about that. Well, it's funny because Christoph has told me that Last Night to Kill Nazis is the only book Clash ever bought on a pitch. And I had it written when I pitched it to him, but basically and the conversation started with, we don't have any room in our release schedule right now. And I said, just let me tell you the title. And
ding.
That's fun. Yeah,
that's fun. It's got a great cover too. It's got some cool original art on that cover.
Well, it's going for that Alistair MacLean Force 10 of Navarone look.
For sure. Yeah.
Which is, what that book was influenced by. It was just like, take Force 10 from Navarone and add a vampire, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, and I always wanted to write a World War II Men on a Mission novel, and technically my science fiction novel with Clash is a tribute to that stuff too, but just set in the 24th century. But I wanted to actually do World War II, so it was fun.
It's interesting that you went with Force 10 instead of Guns of Navarone. Is that because there's a Harrison Ford in that one?
Well, technically, if I'm being honest, I usually say Where Eagles Dare, because
Okay.
Where Eagles Dare is actually closer to The Last Night to Kill Nazis.
So what the you got it's either Clint Eastwood or Harrison Ford.
Right. Well, and I like Force 10 from Navarone. I'm one of the rare people that actually thinks it's a better movie than Guns of Navarone.
Oh, really?
That's a hot take.
That's another, yeah, that's a sizzling hot take.
That is a sizzling hot take. Well, first off, the Brits are actually British in Force 10 from Navarone. The movie is shorter, more concise, and better structured.
Oh, there's that structure.
Guns of Navarone has like that whole like Greek family side half an hour that totally diverts from the plot. And I love Guns of Navarone. Don't get me wrong.
Guns of Navarone's got the big, more of a central hero though, kind of.
Yeah. Well, but it has Gregory Peck playing a Brit and not even trying to do a British accent.
You know what he's playing though is he's playing a little iso ball.
He's pretty much, yeah.
I mean, everybody goes there to see some Gregory Peck iso ball, and they got it. That's a word that he taught me before the podcast went on.
Well, yeah. Hey, Gregory Peck's grandson plays Spock now on Strange New Worlds, and
really?
Yeah. Now, next time you see Strange New Worlds and you see Spock, you can't unsee Gregory Peck in
there. That's gonna, the next time that happens is gonna be the never a clock.
Oh man, he's actually very good at Spock.
I just can't see that. I saw one episode of that. It wasn't even the singing and dancing one, and I just I don't know. I like it when they act like they're on a submarine and it's all kind of. I like it when it's a little more boring. It was trying to entertain me too much. I didn't like it.
Check out episode 4 of the first season. The one that's the one where it's very Balance of Terror meets Alien.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one that's the one that sold me on Strange New Worlds. If every episode was like that. My problem with the way a lot of Star Trek doesn't, I don't know if this would work if people hired me to do Star Trek, but I don't like that they never seem like they're in space. And what you're saying about the submarine thing is like, I would want to try and make the fact that they're in space more realistic, or that they're on a mission, or that they're like in a submarine type life more realistic. That's something that I would do in Star Trek, or like reminders, like every once in a while the gravity going haywire or whatever, just little things.
Yeah,
but
just kind of das booted up.
Das booted up a little bit.
It's ironic that when it's a little more boring, I like it a little more or something. It's real comfort food when they're just sort of doing the routine of space travel. That's the stuff I really, really like. That's the thing about, there's no telling which Star Treks I'll like though. Everybody seemed to hate the Discovery series. And I really liked that first season where they had a tardigrade and there was like a mirror universe, and that really felt like I don't know, there was something about that one that I really enjoyed. Maybe because
the second season is, I think, the best season of Discovery, and that's where Ethan Peck started. So if you've never seen
the one, is that which one has where suddenly somebody's flying around in like a red spacesuit shooting lasers out of it? Is that the second season?
I don't think so. But
is that the one with the Borg time travel?
No, there's no Borg.
Girl from Goon. I don't know. I tapped out after one season, but I did like that first season. Everybody was saying how bad it was, but now everybody's saying how good Strange New Worlds is. And I watched that and I said, "Ooh, no."
Watch the 4th episode of Strange New Worlds. Even if you don't watch the rest of the series,
I will. I'll watch it.
Watch that 4th episode. I think you'll be very pleased.
Okay.
Because it is Das booted up a little bit.
All right.
So
speaking my language.
Yeah. On that note, I might actually have to watch that episode again now that we're talking about it. But yeah, so I think people, some people really like when we digress. So I hope they enjoyed that.
Well, it's a good prep. It's good prep for the book.
Yeah. So Shallow Ends from Podium. And it comes out in September, right?
Yep.
So,
September 24th, about a month away.
but they can pre-order it now, correct?
Pre-order is up.
Pre-order is up. David James Keaton, thank
It's
you so
me.
much for joining Postcards from a Dying World. I know I need to get you on for one of those Science Fiction Hall of Fame episodes. Do you have a particular favorite from that collection?
You know, I read all, was it 4 volumes and an A and a B? So it's like 5 volumes. I read them all, but I think as a kid I reread the first couple so many times that if you ever talk about Baby is 3, uh that's a hell of a story.
Well, I'm just doing volume one right now, the short stories, but
Okay.
uh, and so we just recorded Huddling Place, so that's how far I've gotten
Oh, okay.
in the
Baby
40s.
is
So we're
3 is,
still we're
I
still
would
in the
say
40s.
Theodore Sturgeon's Baby is 3 and how it turns into the novel More Than Human is that's the closest parallel to what I did with that with Shallow Ends, as far as
Hmm.
having a nucleus of a short story, stretching it into one story, and then what else happened that day, going back into the heads of the characters. Um, there's some debate on whether More Than Human is as successful as Baby is 3, and it's also full of that first person that I know you despise. But
Well,
I
I
love that
actually
story.
think he did it well in More Than Humans. So, and I actually like the extension of it. I know some people don't. You know,
It's different. It's
extending doesn't always. I mean, I this is no secret. I've told John personally, but I think the first novella of Demons, for example, is a masterpiece. And I don't like the second half when he turned it into a novel, like full novel. I don't like the second half as much. I mean, it's good, it's okay, but the first half is a fucking masterpiece novella on its own.
yeah. Well,
And you
well,
know,
while I still got you here, I want to ask you about the ultimate fix up, which would be, came out a couple years ago, Blood's a Rover, the Harlan Ellison uh, patchwork creation of a boy and his dog, and all the boy and his dog action and screenplays and comic books. They put it all together into a novel. Did you read that one?
I did not read it. I look, I like Harlan's work. Harlan was an amazing writer, but I had enough personal experiences, odious experiences with him, that
Oh,
he's not
nice. You had
high on my list.
you had some actual run-ins. Those are notorious. Everyone should have their, and if anybody has one, they should tell their Harlan Ellison story.
No, I've told my Harlan story many times, but because I
Can you
have a
can you
couple.
tell it in 5 words or less?
Well, there was a situation at the Stoker Awards in 2005 where
Yeah, did he grope somebody or something?
no, 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 no. He I was going, like, we were afraid they weren't going to have a lot of vegan food at the ceremony, which so I had gone out to get takeout at a vegan restaurant, and Carrie, my wife, stayed in the um, lobby of the hotel, and she was wearing these kind of these very goth platformy shoes, and um, Carrie didn't know who he was, or and he had already been
Oh,
terrorizing everyone, and
oh
then
no.
he made some crack about her shoes, and then she was like shut him down and was like, "What do you need? You want to wear them?" And I think she was kind of implying that how short he was, whatever,
Oh shit.
and basically told him off. But he ended up like really appreciating that she talked back to him and was
Yeah,
like,
it's yeah, she might have activated his little radar.
yeah. So he ended up like trying to talk to her all night, and
Oh
it
geez.
was when I walked back into the hotel with the food, I think he said something like, "Where the fuck have you been? She's starving," or something like that. Um, but that was my first Harlan Ellison experience, which was less personal but funnier. Is I saw him speak at a screenwriting conference, and he was the speaker after oh God, what's his name? The guy who wrote Gods and Monsters and uh, wrote Gods and Monsters and Kinsey. Do you know who I'm
Oh,
talking about?
I saw both those movies.
Yeah, so the guy, he had just won the Oscar for writing Chicago when this
Oh,
conference happened. Like
okay.
literally, he was the reigning screenwriting Oscar writer at the time. And he was talking on the same stage before Harlan Ellison in this room. And the room was overloaded with people because it was the guy who just won the Oscar. And I was in the room because I wanted to see him speak, but also I knew Harlan Ellison was going to be in the room next. So I got a seat up front early. And there were people like still like in line for a Q&A, like a long line when it was time to start Harlan's talk. And Harlan comes in and he's like, I don't remember the guy's name right now, but he was like,
Bill
nobody,
Condon.
Condon, yeah.
That's him.
He's like, hey, Condon, nobody gives a fuck about your Oscar. Get the fuck off the stage. These people need to hear from a real writer now.
Oh my God.
And he was serious. And
Wow.
then later in the same day, Richard Matheson was supposed to speak, and there was a guy, and the way the format of this conference was is they'd have a person up there interviewing the person until they started Q&A. And Harlan kicked the person off the stage who was interviewing Matheson and said, let me take over. And then he proceeded to start talking about himself. And Harlan, and then Chris or Richard Christian Matheson's son, saw what was happening, and he got up and told Harlan, no, 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 I'm interviewing my father now. And which was good because Richard Christian Matheson ended up telling the story about when he was writing on the A Team and he had to have lunch with a monkey and his agent, where a monkey's agent was arguing for more scenes for the monkey. And if he hadn't kicked Harlan off the stage, we wouldn't have heard that story. But yeah, so I mean,
That's
I
funny.
saw Harlan was like a terror at that screenwriting conference. I mean, he was an absolute terror. So
That's funny. The shoe story with your wife is fascinating. He was that's like one of his famous stories is Frank Sinatra giving him shit about the shoes he's wearing. You ever hear
oh
about
yeah, I didn't know that, but
it? Was there's some story where he goes into a bar and I guess he's dressed like a hippie and Frank Sinatra's wearing a suit and tie. Let me just preface this by saying I'm not a Frank Sinatra fan. But Frank Sinatra's like, what are you wearing? Were you expecting a storm or something with those boots? It's just some bullshit. And then somebody says, no, he's the guy who wrote, speaking of Oscars, they say he's the guy who wrote the Oscar. I don't know if you ever saw Harlan Ellison's movie, The Oscar. It's
no.
insane. But I'll talk to you next. After you see it, I want to talk to you again because it's bonkers.
All
And so I
right,
guess
I'll put it
Frank
on my list.
Sinatra's, yeah,
But well, I just heard another Harlan experience with. We just interviewed Linda Castellini, who was one of the students who picked up Philip K. Dick at the airport when he moved to Orange County, and she went for lunch with Phil and Harlan and Norman Spinrad and in a Chinese restaurant in East Hollywood in the 70s, right? And it was funny because I went to look while she was talking. I went to look up to see if the restaurant still existed, and it doesn't. But you can buy the menus from 1973 on eBay for $35.
oh wow.
But she was telling, and I had to like kind of translate for her because she was talking about how grumpy and irritable Phil was, like spending time at Harlan's house. And I was like, well, it's the ego thing. Harlan had this really nice house in East Hollywood, and Phil was like homeless and just getting over a suicide attempt, you know.
Wow.
And so that's why a lot of those issues, you know, were happening. But people can look forward to that on a future episode of the Dickheads podcast. So look out for that interview with Linda Castellini because her experiences are really cool. And Yeah, she had some Harlan things, but no, I haven't read that fix-up novel. I was a little afraid to be honest with you, because Boy and His Dog is one of those things where I liked it when I was younger, but as a older, smarter person, like seeing like some of the holes and some of the kind of gross things that happen in the, especially in the movies, particularly bad.
Yeah, I think that that is kind of its time, but
But
is it
also, there's no like, you can't look at it and be like, oh, it's just Harlan writing about gross people, because he was kind of a gross person. So it makes it a little different, you know,
yeah, I
like,
mean, I guess through the context of when he was writing that, it's kind of like we mentioned Clint Eastwood earlier is probably considered kind of a California, not quite a hippie, but they were considered progressive guys in their time, but not through the lens of today at all. Certainly,
right. Well, and
that
that's the thing
story is
is like Stephen King writes really, really great bullies.
yeah,
But you know, he's not a bully. He's just a person who got bullied. And that comes through when you read his stuff. Whereas now when I read Harlan's gross characters, I kind of feel like I'm seeing a window into a gross gross
I
writer. You know what
I
I mean?
think you're
Like
yeah. I'm
I
not an expert on him, but I think there's a lot of score settling going on with a lot of his stuff. His
yeah,
book, The Beast That Shouted Love at the Heart of the World, uh, has got some of his best stuff in it, but it's angry stuff and it's young man stuff, and
yeah.
with all that comes with it. But long story short, Bloods a Rover, as far as I think of it as the ultimate fix-up novel, just because of how much effort was put into trying to recreate this book he always talked about doing. He always claimed it was always on the horizon. Kind of like with Last Dangerous Visions. It's he's finishing it up. He's going to do it. This book is going to happen. But it's tough to imagine that book ever really existing. That it's one where the short story is enough, or the novella. I think there's three versions: a short story, a slightly expanded novella that was rewritten, and the novel, which can those characters endure so many adventures without seeing them as small. I don't know, like they aren't illuminated by spending more time with them. But there's so much stuff in it. The idea of taking a screenplay and a comic book script and all this stuff and making it into a novel after the fact is, I appreciate the effort, but how much was he involved with it? I don't know. But and did it need to happen? Um,
Right. And then unfinished PKD, I kind of suggest like, you know, we got all kinds of notes on what Phil wanted to do for a sequel for Man in the High Castle. He just didn't want to write about Nazis anymore. And one of the funny things is that if you look at it, like his Valis book started as Man in the High Castle sequels. And so I kind of argue that you could do a sequel to both,
yeah,
right?
that's interesting. Are you cured of writing about Nazis? Have you cured yourself?
No, I would write about more Nazis, but I'm not I don't mind writing about, see, he didn't like doing research about horrible people, whereas like I don't mind it. So um and I don't know if you noticed, but I don't mind writing, well, I don't mind writing the Nazi point of view as long as they get it in the end, you know. Like um I don't have a tendency to, I don't mind writing the villainous characters actually. So I know some people, I think Phil just psychically didn't like doing the research about those
Sure.
people.
I would say give a Boy and His Dog another chance. Not the fix up novel Bloods a Rover, but I would do a reread of Boy and His Dog, as far as the main character is certainly problematic.
Yeah.
But if the character doesn't get it in the end, like you said, then I always think of it as, well, then the reader got it in the end.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to deal with it on the page, as
Well,
far as
hey, one of my favorite short stories of all time is Gene O'Neill's Burden of Indigo, which is a story about a child molester. You know, like um, I can do problematic characters.
uh,
um,
I think I would take that out of context, just every other word you just said out of context and put it on the internet. What's the
Well, no, I
watch
mean,
the sirens light up. No, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're
yeah,
saying.
no, I mean, I think
Anybody can write a morality tale, right? Like,
right. Well, I mean, the whole story is about, um, you know, society, a post-apocalyptic society figuring out how to deal with somebody like that, um, and
is it what? So it's like Demolition Man. They don't know, like, what is this horrible thing that is now? How do we deal
well,
with
it
this?
takes place in a post-apocalyptic California, and people's skin gets dyed. The people who they don't have an ability to imprison people, but they tattoo their skin so they can identify the people, and so that he has these indigo tattoos that um, show his crime, so everyone who sees him knows what he's done. Is kind of like it was originally in Twilight Zone magazine. It's a great story.
That's like that Black Mirror episode, White Christmas, where they sort of erase you visually, so you just see a red outline of people that have committed crimes, but you can't talk to
I
them.
haven't seen that one, but
It's a good check out White Christmas, the episode
yeah.
of Black Mirror. I think you'd like it.
Well, and yeah, that Burden of Indigo, it was originally in Twilight Zone magazine, and it's funny because I read that story in Twilight Zone magazine when I was really, really young, and then became friends with Gene online and communicated with him like a whole bunch of times before he sent me one of his books for review, which collected all the stories that took place in this post-apocalyptic California, and that's when I figured out, holy shit, that's that story from the Twilight Zone, and Gene wrote it. Because I remembered that story from when I was a kid, but
yeah,
I was reading his collection, I didn't realize it was him. It was just a story that stuck with me for a long time, and it's cool stuff. Wow, we are super tangenting.
yeah,
Here.
but I got a great list of recs now. That's a lot of stuff that I can track down. I'll check out.
Well, that's what we try to do on this podcast. What I like to do is, send people those ways. And if you made it this far, you must be a super nerd. I should have announced this at the beginning, but there's also projects I want to send people to that just went live today, as of recording this. One of which is that I just announced the C.L. Moore project, and what that is Catherine Lucille Moore, who was she was a pioneering weird tales writer in the 30s. She wrote a series of stories about a character named Northwest Smith, who's very Indiana Jones, Han Solo type character. And she wrote, Martian Medusas and vampires and Phoenician pirates. And she eventually married Henry Kuttner, and they wrote a story that was in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, the Mimsy
Oh
story.
shit, I love that story.
Yeah, that's Catherine Lucille Moore and her husband Henry Kuttner wrote together under the name Louis Pageant. They also wrote under the name Lawrence O'Donnell, which you would also remember from the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, her story Vintage Season.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because sometimes they would write stories individually and then just use the pen names that they both use sometimes, and figuring they'd sort that later. And but C.L. Moore, before she married Henry Kuttner, she lived during the Depression. She lived in Indianapolis, and she was corresponding with H.P. Lovecraft. She wrote 60,000 words of letters to H.P. Lovecraft. I just ordered the book of her letters. But she wrote all these weird tales stories, and she worked in an insurance building in Indianapolis that is now a Hilton hotel, but they kept the 30s design of the building. And she used to use the company typewriters to type her stories for Weird Tales and send them out. And the mail slot that she sent all the stories out to is still in the Hilton Hotel, the one that was there in the 30s. And so the project that I'm putting together is trying to put a plaque honoring C.L. Moore and her influence on science fiction and horror in the hotel next to the mail slot. So any writers, academics, librarians who want to co-sign the letter with us, they can write to clmoreproject@gmail.com, give me their name, title. I will add you to the cosign of the letter. I can tell you we are working on getting one of the names of the biggest best-selling author of all time to co-sign that letter. So,
Wow.
um,
And tell them to read that story, Mimsy with the Borogroves, because it has the coolest toys I've ever read in anything, as far as what futuristic toys would be like. It is amazing.
yeah. And yeah, CL Moore is, you know, she's crucial to my home state of Indiana, but she was a pioneer. And the fact that this mail slot is still there, how cool would it be if we could get a plaque put there to honor her memory? And so my latest column in Amazing Stories, which I published today, outlines all this. It has pictures of CL Moore, and I hope people will share that article.
Yeah, I'll share it. I'll sign it.
Awesome. And then get the word out on that. And then personally, yeah, so just putting that out there. And of course, I have People's Park out there, and then next year, Unfinished PKD. So so if you came here for Keaton and you don't know me, I got books too. You can find them. Last Night to Kill Nazis is available everywhere at Barnes and Nobles. But my most recent book, People's Park, which is also about Indiana, is out there, and I would appreciate the support as well. But if you're new also to this podcast, check out all the other interviews. We got all kinds of cool stuff. And we are doing this series on the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. And I believe Mimsy is going to be the next episode, actually.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
That is going to be
Space Toys.
Yeah. Space Toys should be next. And that will be with European superfan, Hugo Award-winning fan writer Cora Bullard, and Brian Collins, who is a young science fiction blogger. It is amazing to me when I read Brian's stuff, because he writes these insane breakdowns of 40s and 30s science fiction, and he's like 17 or 18 years old. It's like, I'm like, he's probably older than that, but he's a young person to be doing this stuff. I understand. It gives me hope that there are younger people who will be finding this shit out there. So,
kids are all right.
David James Keaton, anything last words you want to say? We went tangent T.
No, I think that'll do it. I think my battery on this computer is I got 3% left. So perfect.
Awesome. All right, folks.
We squeezed all the juice.
Always, you can you find me online and keep up with my work here and at the Dickheads podcast. So all kinds of cool stuff coming up, and save the date for, we don't have the exact date yet, but 2026, you want to be at Orange County Philip K. Dick Fest, because I'm bringing the fucking heat for that one. So it's going to rule. I got all kinds of cool plans. So make sure you're there. All right, folks. See you later.
Thanks for having me on here.